think of the governor's statement?
Well, he said there's an active investigation. He didn't give any details. I'm glad that he reached out to the president-elect and the vice president-elect. Interestingly, I happened to be in the room with the Vice President Biden, but he was presiding over the receiving of the electoral votes in a joint session in the House of Representatives. I excused myself because that's when I got the word.
It's an awful word indeed. So where do we go from here? I assume they're learning as much as they possibly can about Esteban Santiago, who was the alleged shooter, if you will, the suspect.
If it turns out that he is a mental case, then there's a lot of chain of custody of the weapon and so forth and so on. I think there's going to be a lot of hand-wringing on that. At this point, we see no motive on the material that has been released that he was ISIS-inspired like the Pulse nightclub shooter was.
In Orlando.
59 people lost their lives. Again, a crowded room, lots of people in a small space, replicated in these bunched up crowds at baggage claim or at a ticket counter.
Because these are very vulnerable sites, like baggage claim at an airport or the Pulse nightclub in June of last year. Somebody can go in there with a weapon and just start shooting.
Seaports, train stations. Think, have you seen security at train stations? That would be almost a nightmare to put security in every train station in America. But you have the same kind of thing but you know what the message is to our fellow Americans? It is, these kind of things are going to happen. Don't let it deter you being a productive American. Don't let these guys get us off our step. We're going to be pushing ahead what America does best.
You saw Governor Scott obviously very, very angry right now about what happened today at the Fort Lauderdale International Airport. Senator Nelson, I want you to stay with us. There's more to assess. Phil Mudd is with us right now, our counterterrorism analyst. We have no indication, Phil, this was terrorism per se, that it was anything related to ISIS or some other terror group. The indications, at least the early indications, this is an individual who had severe mental problems.
That's true, but I think there's a difference between what we assess publicly. I would judge now as a private citizen that the case is going to turn out to be someone who has mental illness and there are no further connections. But as in my former position, I would have a different judgment. That is, I need to know whether he talked to anybody before he got on the plane, whether they're family members or friends, where he talked about acts of violence. I need to know his history on social media. So the initial question I would have is not what my private judgment is. I think we're going to have a tragedy that we can't explain, but whether we are certain that nobody knew anything before he got on that plane or when he was on that plane, and that'll take a little while, Wolf.
Well, we do know he showed up at the FBI offices in Alaska at one point not that long ago, and they determined he had severe mental problems. They did something, but it still was not enough to prevent him from checking a bag with a weapon and ammunition on this flight to Fort Lauderdale.
Sure, and let me be clear on that. When I worked at the agency, I used to talk to the head of security there about the people who showed up at the front gate of the agency all the time. People who claimed that the CIA implanted stuff in their brains, people who were lost because they were in Northern Virginia and took a wrong right turn. You can't at a federal facility do something about everybody who shows up with a mental problem. I think there's a broader question that Senator Nelson talked about. That is there a conversation about what you do when someone has a weapon and they clearly have signs of mental disease? I think that will be a question going forward.
I want you to stand by, Phil. There's other breaking news we're following. We're going to continue to follow the breaking news out of Florida's Fort Lauderdale Airport, where a gunman opened fire, killing 5 people and sending hundreds of others fleeing. 8 people have been injured, some of them now fighting for their lives, according to the Florida Governor Rick Scott. The suspect is in custody, and the airport is closed as authorities sweep the area. We're going to bring you more details as we